Hello, my name's Amy. I'm an indie author with 8 published books, and today I'm going to be talking about 3 ways I use outlines to write better books. These basically fall into 3 very simple categories: before drafting the book, while drafting the book, and while editing the book. Let's start at the beginning with before drafting, which is what I know most people think of when you say outlining. This is definitely a technique I've used before, and it's one that I think I use more and more with every book I write. I have done everything from just a few basic notes on a few key plot points, maybe knowing the beginning, the middle, and the end, right through to very detailed chapter by chapter, scene by scene outlines. Usually I fall somewhere between the two. I will have my outline set up and I will know the first few chapters. Maybe I'll know 1 or 2 other things I want to happen in the first half. Then I will know the midpoint and I will know the climax of the book. Any other details or plot points that come to me, I will put in roughly where I think they're going to take place in the book, although that's definitely subject to change as I write. Before I get too far into this outline, I usually need to write the first chapter of the book. Now, first of all, I need quite a firm idea of the opening scene to get going with a book, because I always write chronologically and everything stems from that first moment. But on a more practical level, writing the first 1 or 2 chapters gives me an idea of how long the chapters in the book are going to be. For me, this tends to range from anywhere between about 3,000 words and 5,000 words. But that makes a huge difference to how many chapters you're going to need to finish a book. I tend to fall anywhere between 15 chapters, if they're long chapters in a short book, right up to more like 30 or 40. Once I know the rough chapter length though for the style I'm going for, I can then guess roughly how many I'm going to need in the rest of the book and therefore in my outline. Then, as I said, I go through and fill in the major points, the midpoint and climax usually, and any other smaller plot points that I know along the way. This just all goes into a Word document in chronological order. And if I know exactly how many chapters I'm going to have, I will put the chapter numbers with those plot points in the appropriate places. And if I find some bits of the outline seem a bit sparse, I will just brainstorm until I come up with more ideas to fill in the gaps. Now this of course has some advantages. It's definitely an efficient way to write a book. You're much less likely to brainstorm lots of plot or world building that you don't need. And you're also less likely to write scenes or whole chapters that don't fit in the final book. You know in advance what you need to get from point A to point B, or from the beginning to the end. It's also useful to know what you need to work out along the way. I am often guilty of forgetting to work out character motivations and backstory before I start writing a book. But when I'm outlining, those things colour the entire plot, and so I tend to know them further in advance. That is really useful for writing later on. I do find though that when outlining before you start writing, you definitely need to refine as you go. Your outline should not be set in stone. As you write, and perhaps as new or better ideas come to you, you do need to update your outline. Sticking rigidly to something that is no longer working is just going to be a recipe for disaster. And certainly if your characters change over time, but you don't change the plot in your outline, the end result is going to feel very forced. If you do take the time to keep working on your outline though, making sure that it flows along with the story, that it matches your new character motivations or things you've worked out about the world as you go, then the end result can be more efficient, a quicker draft and a more focused story. And if things go to plan, maybe less editing at the end. That is always my goal. Another really key technique for me is to make the outline as I go along, as I am drafting. Now this is very much like creating an outline in advance, but the key difference is you work out your decisions and plot points on the page, but then transfer all your decisions to your outline. This could also, as I said before, Include adapting an already written outline to reflect what you have actually written in the story rather than what you planned in advance. Quite often I just do this in Scrivener. You've got the little note cards up at the side of the screen, and I tend to just fill those in with 1 or 2 sentences about what has happened in each scene. This is really useful if you want to look back and find something specific later on. And also you can use the compile function in Scrivener to compile just a synopsis of these note cards. That can be really useful if you want a big picture look at your book at the end. For recent books though, I've tended to do this in Word again. I will keep a huge running outline of everything that's happened in the book with a brief synopsis of each scene and much more detailed bullet points of everything that has gone into the book. This is really, really useful if you write multiple projects or if you write slowly. As long as you've been diligent at keeping up this outline as you've gone along, it is a great tool to search for if you've forgotten minor details like locations or side character names or who knows what. And if you take a break from your writing project at any point, when you come back to it, you don't need to read the entire book again. All you need to do is look through this outline that you've created and you have an entire map of everything that has happened so far. This is such a time-saving device, and it's also something you can do even if you're a pantser. You don't have to work any of this out in advance. You can literally fill it in every day after you've finished a scene or a chapter, and just keep the details of what you've actually written. And when it comes to editing, this can be also a really useful tool. You can use it to find plot holes in your story or pick out flaws in character arcs. And it's using outlines while editing that we're going to get onto last. Now, there are so many ways you can use an outline while editing. Fixing your timeline is a really good one, for example. In past books, I have written out every single event in a massive spreadsheet, along with times of day or seasons or weeks. It just depends on the scale of the book. If you're writing a book set over a long period, timelines are something that it's very easy to get wrong, and they often do need a lot of fixing at the end. So creating some sort of spreadsheet or outline can be really useful there. My most recent use of an outline while editing was for Lady of Swords, the book I published in the spring of 2019. In this case, I started by compiling those note cards from Scrivener that I mentioned before, which gave me an outline of everything I'd written and what was in each scene. I then transferred this into a word processor and went through and made color-coded notes on the character arcs. Each character was of course a different colour, and under each scene I wrote how that character changed in every single scene. It was quite a long book with quite a few characters, so this was a really useful tool for me. Character arcs were what I was particularly struggling on in that book. This colour-coded outline that I'd created by the end allowed me to look through and look at just one character at a time. I could then see if their arc progressed logically through the book, or if there were gaps. If one character's notes were in blue, for example, and there were huge numbers of chapters when no blue appeared, I knew their character arc needed work. I then made notes into this outline of what I wanted the character arc to actually look like compared to what it looked like in the first draft, and then I could go through the book itself and make those changes. Because character arcs often trip me up, I've also done a very similar thing in a spreadsheet. In this version, because I had 5 point of views as well, which made things very difficult, I went through first of all and filled in the spreadsheet with what I already had in the book. How did each character change in each scene? I then made a second version which showed what I actually wanted the character arcs to look like. Where there were discrepancies between the two, I knew I needed to do work on the book. You could also do the same for plot if that's where you're having difficulties. Having some kind of before and after outline could work really well. Have a version where you write down what you actually have in the book. Maybe this is one that you made as you were writing. Then you have a second version of the outline where you write down what you really want in each scene. Then you can easily see what needs to change. To be honest, there are many other ways you could use outlines in editing. I think it's one part of writing where outlines are a bit underused, but they can actually be at their most useful. Editing a book is very difficult. You're trying to get your head around maybe 100,000 words and many, many characters. Anything that makes that a bit more manageable is worthwhile. Essentially, with an outline, whether it's written before you start writing the book or while you're editing, you're giving yourself a way to see the bigger picture. You can look at the entire book much more easily. You can follow trends and arcs. You can see where plot holes are or the timeline shifts. And you're giving yourself an easy way to track down little snippets of information later without going through the entire book. So those are a few ways that I've used outlining in my writing process. Maybe some of those will give you some ideas about how you can use them too. They certainly don't need to be complicated. It can be nothing more than bullet points in a Word document. But giving yourself that way to see the bigger picture is so valuable. So if you've got your own outlining techniques or you've had success with them in the past, please tell me down in the comments. I'm always looking for more ways to improve my own outlines. And I hope these tips will be useful to you too as you take your writing forward in 2020. Anything that speeds up or simplifies the writing process can be really useful. And I think outlines are a great tool for that. Anyway, I hope this video was helpful to you. Keep writing, everyone, and I will see you next time.